Hello, everybody. Great to have you here. Thank you. Welcome, Brian Helwig Larsen. It's great to have you here. I've got a guest here today. I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a couple of minutes. So, firstly, a big thank you for being here. Both Brian and I really respect your time. We know that you're busy because everybody is. And we're going to try and really make sure that we add some great value to you today. And you're going to look at the end of it and go, do you know what? That was a really good use of about 15 to 20 minutes. So today, I just love the technology. We're streaming live on LinkedIn. We're also live on Facebook. We're live on YouTube. I've actually linked my podcast to this live presentation. So we're live on iTunes and Amazon Music and about 30 other streaming sites. So we believe it or not, we're actually going to be listened to or seen by about 7,000 to 8,000 people. And, you know, that just really blows me away that we can do that. But you're not here to hear that. What you're here to hear about is finance for small businesses. Now, I've got to confess at this point that this is not my expertise. You know, I'm an expert in the marketing and sales side and helping businesses to grow. So I had a conversation a little while ago with Brian, and he said, look, I'd love to come along as your guest. And that is his expertise. That's what he's spent, you know, a similar amount of time for as I have, many, many years. He's got loads of experience. He spends his time right now advising and training and helping small business owners and others to really understand the financial side of the business. So welcome, Brian. Thank you ever so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Do you want to kick off by just giving people probably a little bit better introduction than I've just done, if you would, please? Tell people a little bit more about what you do.
Thanks very much, Steve. So I've spent about 40 years mostly teaching in the corporate world, teaching people, managers in big companies and huge companies, how their business works, how it makes money, and how they contribute to that positively or negatively through the decisions that they're making. All of that time, I've been running my own series of small businesses, and I've also done a fair amount of both investing in and consulting with small businesses over the years. So I know the sharp end, and I know what it's like in big companies, and I know that the principles are exactly the same. It's just the number of zeros on the end that makes a difference between big companies and small ones.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. I don't know how much you know, Brian, about a guy called Michael Gerber and the E-Myth, but Gerber's a really interesting guy, and if you've not read the book, let me just show you that there, everybody. So that's the E-Myth. I'd strongly recommend you go and buy that book. I think it's a brilliant book. I often half joke with people, there should be a law in this country that says you don't start a business until you've read the E-Myth. But in it, he talks about why businesses fail and what to do about it. And he says that, generally speaking, the people fail due to what he calls operational expertise. Because people often, when they go into business, they're experts operationally. You know, they're good at repairing cars or cutting hair or, being a solicitor or whatever it is they do. And the two areas that they fail on or don't have the level of success that they need are the marketing and sales, so they can't sell enough stuff, and then the finance side, the managing of the money. So my first question is, you know, what do you find? What are the problems? What are the problems that people have on the financial side of the business, would you say?
Well, I think the main thing is that so many people in business don't really understand the financials. Mm-hmm. They've got into business for other reasons rather than because they understood business as such.
Yeah.
And they're missing opportunities to make the business stronger and more profitable that are hiding in plain sight in front of them. You just mentioned a solicitor. I'll tell you a story. A program for a law firm. They had 60 partners. They got together in a hotel in Wales for a couple of days. And I ran a one-day training session based on business game.
Uh-huh.
So they were running a simulation of a law firm for a day, not making any legal decisions, but making all the business decisions. And at the end of the day, one of the delegates came out into the corridor when I was packing up my things to go home. And I said, "What do you think of the day?" And she said it was absolutely awful. I was a bit
Okay.
shocked. I said, well,
Not what you expect, no.
problem. She said, well, I think about it. In the last 10 years, every time we make a proposal to a client, we spend hours putting together the document, making sure that it's beautifully presented, the grammar's perfect, the spelling's correct, and we spend no time at all thinking about the price. And what I realized today is that half my customers are not price sensitive. The other half are. But if I'd realized this 10 years ago, I'd have doubled my earnings in the last 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
that's just lack of a financial insight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true, isn't it? And I take your point about, understanding the numbers. I remember from my past going on to a seminar, and it was like a 2 hour, one of these 2 hour things. And I was sat on a round table, and we were given a task. I always remember this because it was a roofing firm, and we had to look at their set of accounts and tell the person at the front of the room what was wrong with them. And we all had our own copy. And I'm looking through, so I'm reading the accounts and things, and there's 10 people on my table. And after 5 minutes, they said, right, okay, discuss the accounts. And I sort of said, well, I'm not really sure what's wrong. And nobody else was, apart from one person who was an accountant. And he went, well, that's wrong. That there and that there. He instantly knew the problem with that business, whereas the rest of us, we sort of saw a couple of things, but we weren't really sure. And that's the importance, isn't it? That, when someone like myself is a business owner, we've got to be better at understanding the numbers and seeing where the strengths and weaknesses are, I suppose.
Absolutely. A lot of people get really put off by finance because they get confused by the jargon. But actually, it's not difficult to understand. None of it's complicated. It's just stuff you haven't learned. And I've had thousands of people, that I've worked with that said, well, I don't do numbers and I was no good at maths at school. I won't cope with it. Just not true. If you can add and subtract and occasionally use a calculator to multiply two numbers, that's all you ever need to do in business. You don't need to do anything more complicated, but you need to know what to do.
Yes.
I'll give you another story. I worked with a furniture company some years ago that was in a recession. They had lost about 45% of their sales volume once the recession hit. And these guys were working 80-hour, 90-hour weeks trying to get more sales.
Yeah.
We analyzed the numbers together, and we looked at what was going on in the business, and we worked out that if they put that much effort into trying to cut their costs, they were using a lot of imported expensive wood to build the furniture.
Right.
If they could buy a little bit smarter and shave off a few percent there, if they could reduce the wastage of wood by cutting it smarter, if they could use a little bit less labour by, again, planning better how they use the labour, they could probably shave 10 to 15% off their costs. And we worked out that if they did that, they'd immediately be profitable, even at the lower volume of sales.
Right. Yeah.
So, they started working on the right thing instead of the wrong thing, and within 6 weeks they were profitable again.
Right. Wow. It just goes to show, it's such an important thing. I can't stress enough the importance of knowing and understanding. My business now has been going for just over 28 years, and I look back, and to be honest, Brian, I think I wished I'd met you 28 years ago. It's had its ups, it's had its downs, and sometimes in between. But I'm sure, if I'd have been more financially aware than I am now. Obviously, over the years, you learn more and more and stuff. But if I'd have done, right, okay, I'm going to get myself on a training course, and I'm going to make sure, I'm not an average business owner in terms of the financial side of my business. I don't need to be an accountant, but I need to be at a level where I've got a good, firm understanding of my business. So what would you say then would be the top, 3 or 4 things, someone, who's listening today, they run a business, they're, I suppose, a typical level of business owner knowledge of the financial side, if you were. What do they need to know that they don't already know?
Well, there's three things that they probably need to focus on. One is to understand what drives profit.
Yeah.
And that might sound obvious, but a lot of people aren't, they're really not aware. In the same way that the furniture company, they were trying to push for sales when what they needed to do was cut cost.
Yeah.
And with the same amount of effort, they got a much better result. So they didn't understand where the business was sensitive and therefore where they could, what are the levers to pull in order to get more profit.
Yeah.
The second thing was really to understand what drives the cash flow.
Yes.
Again, that's not complicated. There's only three things that drive cash flow. It's making money, it's capital expense, and it's working capital. If you understand those three, and I could explain them in half an hour, a completely different view of how you run your cash flow and what you can do about it. And that's, take as an example the working capital. People, well, that's one of the jargon phrases that causes people to glaze over and cross their eyes. But working capital is how much you've given credit to your customers, how much stock you've got if you're a business that holds stock, and how much credit you got from your suppliers. Just three things. And you add those numbers up, you get a number called working capital. Now, if your business needs a lot of working capital, it's going to be really hard to grow it. Because every time you get more sales, you're going to need more working capital because you're giving more credit to people. You're holding more stock. You're not getting much more credit from your suppliers because your suppliers are always selling you less than you're selling on to other people.
Yeah.
So it gets really hard. But if you can shrink the working capital by managing it better, you make the business much easier to grow. You could even get to a situation where you've got negative working capital, which means that your suppliers are financing you. In that case, the more you grow, the more cash you have. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would say the first thing is profit. The second thing is understanding how to manage cash. And the third thing is having a plan and knowing how to control it. What numbers to look at to make sure that you're on track and that you've got warning signals if things are going wrong in the business.
Fantastic. So I know when we spoke a little while ago and we agreed that you'd come along to today, you mentioned that you're running some training programs for business owners to actually help them to improve their knowledge and skills around this. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I really do think this would benefit people.
Okay. Well, I've used two approaches that are almost unheard of in teaching about finance. The first is that I mostly teach through using business games. So people are running a business, but they're getting 5 years experience in a couple of half days, seeing how the business grows and shrinks as things happen in the marketplace, as they make decisions. And because I use a very visual model, then people can actually see where the money's coming from, where it's going to. And so that enables them to pick up the basics much more quickly, and it sticks with them for decades afterwards. They don't forget it.
No. I really like that, because it sounds like it's an active session where I'm not just sat there listening, but I'm taking part and making decisions and so on. Yeah,
it's very
like
active, working in a team rather than on your own. It's discussing things, arguing about the best thing to do, the right decision to take, and then immediately seeing what the results were of making that decision.
Fantastic.
So it's a really good learning environment.
Yeah.
The second thing I do, which I couldn't do in the corporate world, you get people on a training program, you've got to run it for 2 days flat out and then you stop. But what I do now is I run a program over 8 weeks.
Right.
So you've got weekly sessions and you get back to work and you think about what you've learned in the context of your business. And you do homework. Let's say we're talking working capital, you would analyse it, talk to your mates about it, talk to your staff about it, come back and discuss it, so that you're really internalising what you've learned on the programme.
Again, that's... I used to get people all the time, coming along to my, LinkedIn training or something, and then I'd phone them up 3 weeks later, and to be honest, half of them had forgotten what I said, They hadn't done anything, and I love that idea of that staggered learning. I think it's much more powerful than, like a brain dump of, coming on a 2-day or a 4-day seminar where you go away thinking, blimey neck, I've learned so much stuff today, but 6 weeks later you've forgotten it all. Whereas if you can learn in bite-sized chunks, I think that's really useful. And is all that done online, Brian?
Yes, it is. All done through Zoom sessions. Easy.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so how would, if someone was interested in that, what would they do? And I suppose, who is it for? Is it for larger businesses or for small, or both?
Actually, it's for both.
Okay.
I've actually put into the chat, if people can see the chat, there's a link there to a little quiz, take you 5 minutes or less, maybe 2 minutes. Yeah. And that quiz has got on the end of it a link to my calendar. So if you wanted to talk to me, that's the easiest way to do it. You get straight into my calendar and book a meeting.
Perfect. Okay, great.
And what I'll do, actually, a calendar's set at the moment to only take people in the next 3 or 4 days. But as soon as we get off the call, I'll reset it so that if somebody gets the calendar, they've got the next month in which to make a meeting. But I've actually got a course starting next week on Thursday. So if somebody's really keen to get started, next Thursday morning, 9 till 1 is the first session. We're doing a weekly session. The first couple of sessions are 4 hours, but after that's 2 hour sessions each week.
Okay.
8 weeks. Yeah.
Okay, great. Just to talk a little bit about that quiz, actually, because, again, when we spoke, we'd agreed that we were going to do this, but you sent me the quiz, and I filled it in, and I'm going to say it was really good. See, again, it really gets you thinking. You know, I'm not. There were several questions. I think I mentioned it to you that I wasn't quite sure about that. I thought it was this, but I didn't really know. And that is obviously a weakness in my business. And so, just taking the quiz is really useful, and having a look at the results that you get so you can really assess and understand your level of knowledge. Because often with things, we don't know what we don't know. I hear people all the time in the digital marketing world who say, I'm on LinkedIn, but I've no idea how to use it. And that's half the problem. People don't know what they don't know with things that they're not experts in. So, okay, well, we're just about out of time. We're on 18 minutes, so I said less than 20. So, do you want to just tell everybody your website, just so we've got people on the podcast can know where to go, because they obviously can't see your comment on the system.
Yep. So it's masteringbusinessacumen.com.
Masteringbusinessacumen.com. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, the website's just about up and running at the moment.
Okay,
it's a bit
great.
shaky, but I've just got it put together.
Okay, and an email? Do you want to give them an email just in case they can't get on or can't find it?
Yes. Yep. The easiest thing is Brian, and that's Brian with an I, at masteringbusinessacumen.com.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you ever so much. And if you want to hear from me, you want to talk to me about all things marketing and getting more sales and stuff like that, again, just go to my website, which you can see on the screen, which is steve-mills.com, and use one of the gold buttons to book a meeting. So thank you ever so much. If you would like to come to any of my other sessions, I run something every day, so you'd be very, very welcome to do so. And thanks for being here. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Okay, we're all done. Good. That was really good. Well done. Fantastic. Yeah. You buffered a couple of times, but, it was only a second, so it's just one of those things, isn't it? What I'll do now is I'll send you the recording. Oh, hang on, sorry.